The Boundary Blueprint, a roadmap for mental health and identity. Introduction. Suffering. To live is to suffer. To survive is to find some meaning in the suffering. Friedrich Nietzsche. Sometimes in life there comes a point at which you have to push back. Learning to say no is more than just a verbal act. It is a profound assertion of personal autonomy that can serve as the linchpin in putting an end to suffering caused by boundary violations. The word no is a potent weapon in the arsenal of personal boundaries, capable of recalibrating power dynamics and regaining control. It acts as a checkpoint for our emotional, psychological, and sometimes even physical well-being, especially in interactions where power imbalances or the presence of manipulative traits can cause significant distress. Consider a child who has a mother who exhibits the dark tetrad of personality: Machiavellianism, narcissism, psychopathy, and sadism. In such a hostile environment, the ability to say no becomes critical for survival. When a parent exhibits these extreme personality traits, boundary violations are likely to become routine, and the emotional toll on the child can be debilitating over time. When a child is caught in a web of manipulation and emotional abuse, it can be extremely difficult for them to assert their own needs or protect their psychological space. However, it is precisely in high-stakes situations that the ability to say no becomes invaluable. When a child says no, they are signaling a limit, drawing a line that serves to protect their emotional and psychological integrity. This is not only a form of resistance, but also an affirmative act of self-definition, a way to assert one's agency in a fundamentally imbalanced relationship. Of course, saying no in such situations is fraught with danger, including the possibility of retaliation or escalation from the person being addressed. It is, however, frequently the first step toward more comprehensive strategies for establishing personal boundaries and ending suffering. Saying no can be liberating. It sets the stage for subsequent boundary-setting measures such as seeking external support, pursuing therapeutic interventions, or in extreme cases, considering physical separation. While saying no does not immediately change the external circumstances or the behavior of others, it does change the individual's internal emotional landscape, making it more conducive to taking subsequent actions that can lead to the cessation of suffering. Learning to say no is more than a simple act. It is a critical skill in the intricate art of boundary management, especially for those involved in emotionally or psychologically abusive relationships. Individuals can reclaim a sense of control and agency by asserting this boundary, both of which are necessary for alleviating suffering and improving overall well-being. The word no then becomes a foundation upon which to build healthier emotional states and relationships. Personal boundaries serve as an important psychological construct that, like the walls of a container, holds and preserves our positive emotional energy. They define the emotional and psychological space between us and others, thereby defining our personal identity and intrinsic worth. Boundaries enable us to maintain our emotional integrity by clearly defining what is us and what is not us, facilitating the conservation of positive emotional energy, and thus contributing to our overall well-being. This spatial metaphor of a container is apt because, like a physical container, our boundaries protect the contents within, our emotions, self-esteem, and sense of self, from outside forces that seek to encroach on or deplete them. Importantly, the stronger our boundaries, the more effectively we can maintain positive emotional states like joy, confidence, and calmness. Permeable or ill-defined boundaries, on the other hand, can result in the leakage of this vital emotional sustenance, resulting in states of emotional and psychological depletion. Weak personal boundaries can make us vulnerable to the negative emotional and psychological effects of external sources, such as toxic relationships or stressful environments. in the same way that a poorly constructed container would be incapable of retaining its contents when subjected to external pressures. Furthermore, personal boundaries act as our first line of defense against stressors, acting as a psychological buffer that reduces the emotional and cognitive toll of stress. By establishing limits, saying no when necessary, dictating how others will treat us, and protecting our time and emotional resources, we fortify ourselves against the world's constant demands and expectations. The advantages are twofold. First, it helps to preserve our positive emotional energy. And second, it creates a psychological moat that stressors must cross, giving us the time and space to employ effective coping mechanisms. When we consider the constant barrage of stressors in modern life, from work pressures and interpersonal conflicts to societal expectations, the role of personal boundaries in psychological defense becomes even more critical. Poorly managed stress can lead to a variety of negative outcomes, including anxiety, depression, and even physical ailments such as hypertension or digestive problems. Effective boundaries serve as a gatekeeper, removing unnecessary stressors and allowing us to pick our battles wisely. They provide emotional triage, allowing us to better allocate our emotional and psychological resources. Boundaries in this way contribute not only to the maintenance but also to the amplification of our emotional well-being, facilitating personal growth and emotional resilience. Personal boundaries serve as lines of demarcation between what we can control and what is beyond our control, allowing us to separate our responsibilities, choices, and emotional well-being from external circumstances and the behaviors of others. This idea has been succinctly encapsulated in the Mind OS program, a comprehensive psychological framework that uses systems thinking to understand human behavior and relationships. Dobransky, 2001. Personal boundaries, according to this framework, serve as a cornerstone for self-regulation and emotional management by providing a tangible parameter around our subjective experience. These demarcation lines provide us with a type of cognitive and emotional governance that informs and guides our interpersonal interactions and decision-making processes. The control principle is at the heart of this. We gain a better understanding of our locus of control, or the extent to which we believe we can influence events and their outcomes, when our boundaries are firm and well-defined. The more defined and stronger our boundaries, the more empowered we are to control our actions, feelings, and reactions. When our boundaries are porous or ambiguous, we risk diluting our sense of agency and creating confusion about what we can and cannot control. This can lead to increased stress, anxiety, and emotional turbulence because we may expend unnecessary emotional energy attempting to control external events or other people, which is often futile and exhausting. Mind OS also emphasizes the importance of clear boundaries in avoiding codependency and fostering healthy relationships. A well-defined boundary helps us distinguish our own needs, wants, and feelings from those of others, allowing for a balanced relationship dynamic. We are more likely to engage in codependent behavior when our boundaries are muddled, taking on the emotional burdens of others as if they were our own. This essentially crosses the line between what we can control, our reactions, our emotional well-being, and what we cannot, the actions or emotional state of others. Furthermore, the effectiveness of personal boundaries in delineating control extends to other aspects of life, such as work, friendships, and family dynamics. In professional settings, for example, defining the scope of our roles and responsibilities can help us manage work-related stress. Knowing where our professional domain begins and ends allows us to focus our energy and skills more effectively, avoiding resource depletion on issues beyond our control. Attempts to control elements outside one's personal boundaries exact a psychological toll, which is a recurring theme in both clinical and real-world settings. It manifests itself in a variety of ways across various domains of life. frequently resulting in emotional exhaustion, stress, and even long-term psychological harm. These futile attempts to control the uncontrollable constitute boundary violations, both of oneself and, frequently, of others. These are vividly illustrated in a variety of key areas, including interpersonal relationships, professional settings, and even our relationship with ourselves. For example, in romantic relationships, one partner may expend enormous emotional energy, attempting to control the other's actions, thoughts, or feelings. This exercise in external control usually stems from internal insecurities or fears, whether it's trying to dictate how a partner dresses, who they can interact with, or how they should feel in certain situations. The attempt not only represents a breach of the other person's boundaries, but also a futile attempt to control an aspect of life that is inherently uncontrollable, ultimately leading to emotional exhaustion and relationship strain for both parties. Similarly, parents may seek to micromanage their children's lives, from academic performance to social interactions, well into adulthood and familial relationships. The ostensible goal may be to steer the child toward a successful future, but attempting to exert control outside of one's appropriate domain frequently backfires. It causes stress and conflict, eroding the parent-child relationship and preventing the child from developing their own coping skills and sense of agency. Managers or employees who try to control every detail of a project or the work of their colleagues frequently find themselves stressed and burned out. This overreach strains professional relationships while also yielding diminishing returns. It stifles creativity, reduces productivity, and fosters a toxic work environment in which employees feel disempowered and undervalued. The attempt to exert control over factors and people outside one's proper sphere almost always results in stress and dissatisfaction, contributing neither to personal well-being nor to organizational success. Even in our relationships with ourselves, the attempt to control can have negative psychological consequences. Consider the pursuit of physical perfection through extreme dieting or compulsive exercise. These efforts are not only often unsustainable, but they also disregard the body's inherent needs and boundaries. The emphasis shifts away from health and well-being and toward an unattainable ideal, an external construct over which we have no actual control. As a result, there is often a cycle of emotional highs and lows, as well as stress and potential health risks. The recurring theme in each of these examples is the expending of enormous emotional and psychological resources in an attempt to control what is fundamentally uncontrollable. These erroneous attempts serve as cautionary tales, emphasizing the importance of recognizing and respecting personal boundaries as demarcations of what we can realistically control. When we blur or cross these lines, we not only jeopardize our emotional energy, but also infringe on the boundaries of others, resulting in a vicious cycle of stress, conflict, and emotional exhaustion. Recognizing our control limits, understanding where our boundary begins and ends, is a critical step toward emotional well-being, enriching our relationships, and living a balanced life. Problem solving. The act of letting go of what we can't control and focusing on what we can is more than just an exercise in emotional regulation. It's a fundamental paradigm shift with the potential to solve or at least alter our perception of most of life's problems. The idea is similar to the serenity prayer, which is frequently mentioned in therapeutic circles. The wisdom to distinguish between what can and cannot be changed. Giving up control over external events and circumstances becomes an empowering strategy in this light, providing us with a concrete path to problem solving and emotional equilibrium. We mobilize our resources more effectively by focusing our attention and efforts on what we can control, optimizing for the best outcomes given the constraints we operate under. This can be seen in a variety of ways. In a conflicted relationship, for example, rather than attempting to change the other person's behavior, which is beyond our control. We can choose how we engage, set boundaries, or even decide whether the relationship is worth maintaining. This shift enables us to actively participate in problem solving, providing an opportunity for improvement or alternatively closure. Similarly, in professional settings where work-related stress is common, the solution may not be controlling all aspects of the project or team dynamics, which is often impossible, but rather managing one's own time, setting realistic goals, and communicating effectively. The key here is to take charge of your role in the situation, understanding that while you may not be able to control everything, you can certainly control your actions and reactions. As a result, you will be able to become a proactive problem solver rather than a passive victim of circumstance. Letting go has significant psychological benefits that go beyond immediate problem solving. It frees up mental and emotional resources that would otherwise be spent on worry, anxiety, or futile attempts to control the uncontrollable. This freedom frequently leads to a clearer mindset and a more focused approach to dealing with other challenges that arise. The energy saved can be redirected to more constructive endeavors such as personal development, skill acquisition, or relationship building to improve our overall quality of life. Recognizing that a problem is not ours to solve is sometimes the most effective solution.